Marinero, the Sick podcast, and a lot of people in Montreal are talking about Patrick Roy as a candidate to be the next Habs general manager. Guess where I'm going? To Colorado. To one man who knows him very well. He covered his career there when Patrick Roy was there as a goalie, as a player, and when he was there as coach and VP of hockey ops. Adrian Dater of Colorado Hockey Now. How you doing, bud?
I'm hanging in there, Tony. Just trying to stay out of trouble, you know. Geez, we got about 60 degrees and sunny here in Denver. How's the weather there? Cold?
It is cold, yes. It is absolutely freezing. But it's okay because it kind of seems like hockey season, I guess.
Montreal.
It's a Sick podcast. Yeah, thanks for doing this. It's brought to you by Cherry River Hard Seltzer, only 90 calories, natural flavors, no preservatives, now available in Quebec grocery stores and at the beer store. So once again, a couple of days ago marked the 26-year anniversary of the Canadiens trading Patrick Roy to the Colorado Avalanche, December 6th, 1995. Man, time flies when you're having fun, huh?
Oh, man. Incredible, right? I was there. I covered that story. It's funny. The night before he was traded, the Avs playing San Jose Sharks, and it was the old McNichols Arena. And Pierre Lacroix, rest in peace, was up in the makeshift suite they had on the phone the whole night. This was landline phones, don't forget. No cell phones.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And we pretty much knew what he was doing. He was calling Resignation and leaving messages and saying, call me back. I got wind of the story that was done at about 2 a.m., but no internet back then, nothing to tell. I had to basically tell it to my cat. You know, I was the only person I could tell at that hour. And got a call at 6 a.m. from the Avs PR man, Jean Martineau, who gave me the news that the deal was done. I can't believe it happened still to this day. It was so weird. And, you know, the whole thing, of course, we know all the backstory of it, but wow. Yeah. He had quite a run here. I know that doesn't always sit well with Canadian fans, but, you know, I'm glad Patrick made up with the Habs in a way. And here he is. His name is in the hopper for a possible role. And I guess that's what we're going to discuss more of here. Right, Tony?
Well, Pierre Lacroix was an agent who turned general manager. And when he became general manager, the agency was in the hands of Bob Sauvé, right? And Bob Sauvé was Patrick Roy's agent at the time. And so, you know, they really wanted to get Patrick to Colorado. Well, once it was, once it was official that, you know, there was no turning back and that Patrick was going to be moved, which based on the information I have, you know, once again, Canadians are playing the Detroit Red Wings. Patrick was in goal. He's left in goal for 9 goals. They're down 9-1. Mario Tremblay pulls him. He comes to the bench. There's a stare down between the two. Patrick Roy turns back, goes over to see then president of the Canadiens, Ronald Corey, and says to him, I played my last game in Montreal. Corey's face turns a different color. And based on the information I have, even though they met the next day, neither side was willing to turn back at that point. Patrick wanted to move on, and the Canadiens didn't hold him back. They're like, you know what? You want to move on? We want to move on too. And before that happened, there was word that it was probably going to be Patrick's last year in Montreal.
Right.
Because Serge Savard was fired 5 games into the season. But before he was trying to trade Patrick.
Yep.
And so then he ends up getting traded to the Colorado Avalanche, a team that was a Patrick Roy away and maybe a Mike Keane away from winning the Stanley Cup. And he wins 2 Stanley Cups in Colorado in a span of 7.5 years, I think, right?
Yep. 2 cups, 7.5 years. Conn Smythe win in 2001. The only guy still to win a Conn Smythe trophy in 3 different decades. Don't think that'll ever happen again.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. There's no doubt about it. Now, when that deal was done and you found out about 2 o'clock in the morning of December 6th, 1995, the second that deal you found out about it, you said what?
Well, first of all, I was shocked, but not shocked because we knew that Pierre wanted him. You know, the blow up happened on the 2nd. Wah went back to his house that night, and Bob Sauvé came over to his house that night, and so did Mike Keane, who also drove Wa's son, Jonathan, over at that time because somehow, Mike Keane and Jonathan were driving to Bob Sauve's house is where it was. And so they all met over there. And Wa, by all accounts in that room was saying it's over. I think he was shocked still that everything happened, but he thought it was over. Remember there was that poll in the Montreal newspaper saying, should we trade this guy or not? And the poll said they should. The fans said yes. That I know upset him a lot. Still, he was brooding about that.
There was also at the time, there was a promotion with Upper Deck, and they would have billboards all over the city. And there was one or two billboards, and this is player cards, of course, that said "Échanger Roy," trade Roy, which was kind of like their publicity for player cards, but it got mistaken. A lot of people thought that there was a campaign to have Patrick Roy traded, so much so that there were billboards. That didn't go over very well. It was a nightmare. And that night where he let up 9 goals, when the score was 7-1, there was a shot from Fedorov that was outside the blue line, and he stopped it, and the fans cheered mockingly, and he raised his arms. And
Yeah.
Once he did, you just kind of knew it was the beginning of the end,
Yeah. And also, Mario Tremblay was new a coach and trying to assert himself. I didn't know this, but it was in Patrick Waugh's father's book that he wrote on Patrick. And there was a night in Edmonton when, Patrick didn't want to go out to the clubs necessarily and be recognized and have to sign autographs. He wanted to have a beer back at the hotel, that kind of thing, and not be recognized as much. But Mario, I guess, came in to the Westin Edmonton and said, spotted him and Pierre Turgeon having a beer and said, no drinking at the hotel bar. You guys get out of here. And Patrick was like, come on, man. This is junior high stuff, junior hockey stuff. And, it just kept on from there. I think those two made up. That hilarious food ad they did about a year ago was pretty good.
Several months ago, as a matter of fact.
Got some good money for that. But, amazing thing. And, he gets dropped off here in Denver, Colorado, where none of us still knew a wrist shot from a wristwatch. We were just rookies here, just had a team dropped in our laps from Quebec. And now all of a sudden, here comes this goalie who's, basically St. Patrick, the institution in Montreal. How could this happen? Just amazing story. To me, there still hasn't been enough written about it. And I'd love to see a good 30 for 30 or something on that kind of thing. What can you say? We all got lucky here in Denver with this.
At what point did you guys say to yourselves in Colorado, this team's going to win the cup?
It was not during the regular season, even after Patrick. People forget that he was lit up a few times still here. He lost 7-0 to Detroit in a game later that regular season. It just, they're not as good as the Wings, et cetera, et cetera. They could have lost easily to Vancouver in the first round. I remember it was 2-2 going back to Vancouver. And they were down 1-0 in the series, and there was a lot of turmoil around the team in a way, a lot of uptight nerves. Pavel Bure happened to be out for that series, which, a little bit of a break there for the Avs. They could have lost to Chicago in the second round. Some injuries there, some weird circumstances. Chris Chelos got shot up too much Novocaine second round, couldn't play a key game. They win that series. Then they go to Detroit. Wings are going to roll 62 wins, get series over. That's when Patrick became Patrick again. And when it was like 2-0 Detroit, I'm like, okay, I think they may win the cup. We all thought they were going to play the Penguins in the cup because they were playing the Florida Panthers in the Eastern Finals. Oh, come on, Panthers can't beat Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr. They did. They got the lucky break there, beating, and it was a sweep. And I'll tell you what, it happened fast because they weren't really that good a team. After Patrick, they were a good team. They weren't a great team. All of a sudden, they caught fire, and it was all Patrick. I think from round 3 on, it was all Patrick Roy. He was just dominant.
How was it covering him as a player back then?
I've said this before. I really like covering him as a player because number one, he was always good copy. He was
For
rarely
sure.
dull. He always gave you a pretty good line. I remember he took a shot at Glenn Sather. I remember, I think it was '98 when he did not get picked to the Olympic team. No, I'm sorry. It was another Olympic team before that or something. I think I got my teams wrong. He did play in the '98 Olympics for Canada.
That was Nagano, I think.
Right. I'm thinking of some other team. Anyway, he took a good shot at Sather. I remember, and that made for a good copy. He was always, told it like it was. He was a good guy to talk hockey with because he had a photographic memory about things. He never forgot anything. There were many times in locker rooms where he would say, hey, remember when, Theo Fleury scored that goal on me about 5 years ago in a game? And everybody's like, no. Well, he remembered everything.
Wow.
And, he was more accommodating in a way for the first year or so. There was a real honeymoon period. I remember he let me come into his house and do one of those stories where you do a story like a day with Patrick kind of thing. And I rode in his big SUV, he drove me around town. I remember we went to a electronics store. This is right when he first got traded. A week or two later, I'm sitting in Patrick's truck, SUV. He goes into an electronics store. He needed new TVs and everything for the house. And basically it was like a bunch of stuff, big TVs, probably about 15 grand he was going to spend. And they told him, though, that, well, we can't deliver it today. And he's like, basically said, how much money do I need to get you to change your mind? And they did. They brought it that night. And he got all his TVs and stuff hooked up.
Oh, really? That's a cool story.
Yeah, he was not going to be denied. He was going to pay whatever it took. I don't think they knew who he was at the time either. Patrick Waugh wasn't. Nobody knew who he was. I remember John Elway talking about John Elway, the great John Elway, and they asked him about why at a Broncos practice. He goes, "How come they don't call it Roy?" He's just, everybody's just, people knew, the hockey fans knew of him, but nobody else. He would walk around Denver unrecognized for those first weeks. So as he went on along, he had so much success as a team and a player that was always in a pretty good mood, basically. But there were times if you crossed him or you wrote something you didn't like, and I did that a couple of times. I mean, I got my head chewed off by him. I know what it's like to be screamed at by Patrick Waugh. And
really? How did that go down? Like, paint the picture for me. How does that go down?
Well, I wrote in my book.
So I'm Adrian Data. You're Patrick Waugh. I write a piece. He doesn't like it. How does it go?
Well, one time I wrote a thing about him smashing up the coach's room, Bob Hartley's coach's room in 1998 because he.
I remember that.
Didn't get credit for a win that he played nine. All the, it's one of those games you get taken out for a breather, and the other guy makes a save, and he gets the good game winning goal scored. He gets the win. Patrick at that time was going for Terry Sawchuk's record. Wasn't up happy with it. Turns out he smashed up Bob Hartley's video room with his full uniform, by the way. Smashed up the TVs, VCRs, everything. And about 2 weeks later, I finally got somebody to leak that to me. I didn't really know anything about it that night. I was in Anaheim when it happened.
Okay.
So when I get leaked to me, I wrote the story, what happened. Guess who was in town that very day to play the Avalanche? Montreal Canadiens. So he thought I'd waited 2 weeks to embarrass him, you see. I would have written the story. He was very, very unhappy with me. He blew up at me. He made some accusations toward me that weren't true. And we ended up pretty much going face to face for a little while. He's the type, though, you had to stand up to him, I think, to get his respect in a way, you had to know that you weren't just going to be bullied by him. If you were wrong on something, I had to admit it and say sorry, but he could be wrong too sometimes. And he did apologize to me one time, I think over that incident, basically. He got a little carried away. As a coach, he barked at me a few times, that's for sure. Didn't like some questions about personnel or whatever.
He would answer back what, in front of other members of the media in a scrum, on a one-on-one, shoot you a text, pick up the phone, give you a call?
Shot me a couple texts, a couple times, yeah. He would never try to really embarrass you, though, in front of people. I mean, I've always said Patrick has lot of class, really. I thought, I thought he was always gracious around kids and older people, things like that. He didn't always want to be bothered, of course, because he was a superstar player, right? I mean,
Of course.
but I never saw him just lash out and be a real jerk to people at all. He took it out on me sometimes, right? As a beat writer, right? I would have yelled at myself too a lot. So I never took any of that personally. You had to be prepared though around him. If you didn't know your hockey and you were sort of asking stupid questions, then he might bark at you in front of a group.
Yeah.
But usually he would not try to be that way. I mean, he kept things private pretty much.
4.5 years into his tenure as a player with the Colorado Avalanche, if memory serves me well, he was arrested at one point on allegations of domestic abuse, or I don't know. I don't quite remember how that whole thing ended up, but I mean, he didn't do jail time, at least because he continued to play with the Avalanche. Do you remember how that all went down? I think there was a 911 call that came from his home. They hung up. Police showed up. They saw the house. There was some damage done to the house, and they brought him in. And how was his relationship with the media after that and all that? How did that go over?
Well, I do remember that, of course. That was 2001. He was, going. That was the year the Avs won the Cup with Ray Bourque, and he was going for the victory record at the time. Still, it was big news here. Obviously, it was big news around the hockey world. He was arrested and charged, but the charges were dropped. His now ex-wife basically said that she didn't want charges to go forward, but once cops come to the house, on a domestic situation, I recall reading and remembering, they have to charge you with something basically.
Okay.
So the charges were dropped. Obviously, it was not a happy time for him or anybody. I do remember how nervous he was talking to the media that first time. I think that was the most nervous I've ever seen him. He was very, shaken might be the word. They brought him out from behind closed doors to meet with us for a few minutes. He said, he has no comment basically. And they got through that somehow. The team stuck by him. I remember Ray Bourque saying, this is a family matter basically, and everything that happens in a family stays within the family, and they supported him. And I know that got him feeling much more like he wanted to give back to the Avs too. Like he had something to give back. And I don't think he ever wanted to talk about that or use it as motivation, but I know that he and Ray Bourque became even more close after that, based on Ray basically being the guy to stand up and say, look, this is we'll deal with this, and this is private between them, and he's our brother, and we're all, so is Michelle, and we all love her too, and basically let's have a happy ending, I think. And that's about as much as I ever dug into that, because off ice stuff like that, you don't want to go too overboard. I know that things happen in the heat of the moment, and everybody regretted, I'm sure, what happened.
If you want an Avalanche jersey or any team in the National Hockey League, any sport, any team, any player, sportbuffshop.com for all of your officially licensed sports apparel and our sick merchandise as well. Use code SICK15 for 15% off on all of their items. Okay, anyway, he finishes off his career with the Colorado Avalanche, 2 Stanley Cups, 1 Conn Smythe, and years later, he ends up holding the position of VP of Hockey Ops and head coach of the Colorado Avalanche. That lasted for 3 years. And 1 month before pro camp, he actually quit, citing philosophical differences of opinion and different vision than that of the organization, most likely that of Joe Sakic. Talk to me about his career now as a coach and VP of Hockey Ops, and how that all went down, and whether it was smooth or not.
Well, it was all great stuff at the beginning. I mean, good ship lollipop here for a good solid year. He gets brought back to good fanfare. The media, rolled out the red carpet. The team did. He sounded great. He gave all the right answers. and the Avalanche win the division that first year, a very tough division after being terrible the year before, a few years, and he wins the Jack Adams Award. So everything was great. They lost in the first round in the playoffs, and that was a disappointment. But Tyson Barrie got dirty hit from Matt Cook, and they lost the Wild. And they were still a pretty decent team the next 2 years under Waugh. He almost got them to the playoffs those 2 years. They still had winning records. That third summer, though, they were starting to get a little worse. Remember Patrick blew up a little bit. Mocked Matt Duchene after a goal that he scored, his 30th goal.
Yeah, Duchene scored his 30th goal of the year. Yeah, he mocked him. He said, "Are you kidding me or what?" Yeah.
He started to get a little ticked off at his team, I think, at that point, and thinking it seemed like he didn't have as much faith in that team anymore. I don't think he had faith in Semyon Varlamov anymore as a goalie. And then came the offseason. I think he wanted some free agent signs. I know Alexander Radulov was one guy that he wanted.
Because he had him with the Ramparts.
Had him with the Ramparts. And basically ownership Sakic said no. And that became a contentious thing. And a few other personnel decisions that he probably wanted that they also wouldn't do. I think the Avs wanted to rebuild basically at that point or start over a little bit as far with younger guys. Patrick, who was the coach, coaches always want to win now. They want older guys who can get them to win now, maybe. He didn't want to go through that. He quit in August of that year, basically left the Avs high and dry for right before the start of training camp.
So he wanted a free agent. The GM didn't want him. He wasn't happy about that. The GM and the organization wanted to go younger and rebuild. Right. He wanted to patch and make the team better right away to try and go for it. Hence some of the philosophical differences. And
yeah, I mean, it's probably more to that too. But yeah, that's probably the gist of what went wrong here. And Patrick, I said from day one, I always thought that I don't know how long Patrick's going to be able to be subservient to people above him making personnel decisions. So in a sense, it wasn't a surprise to me that this happened. Nobody expected him to quit out of the blue on August of 2016. They had to bring in Jared Bednar, and they had a 48-point season. So let me tell you, that did not go over well with ownership here in Denver. I don't think that has ever been patched up since that he left.
Did he when he was the coach and all this was happening and he quit a month before pro camp? Did he talk to you at all or any other member of the media to say, "Hey, I want this guy. They don't want. I want this guy. These guys don't want. These guys are this. These guys are anything"?
No, Patrick had pretty much stopped communicating with me, let's say on text or calls. By then, I think he'd started to withdraw a lot from people in Denver, the media, whoever else. Patrick was never a guy you could get on the phone very easily, first of all. If I ever did get him on the phone, he would often say, "Let me call you right back." Of course, he'd never call. Sometimes you'd get him in a talkative mood for whatever reason, but no, he was not talking much at all then. It was just a surprise.
In ending, the Canadiens hired Jeff Gordon as VP, Executive Vice President of Hockey Ops. They want a two-person system. That's what Jeff Molson is striving for. Jeff Gordon talked about someone that he could have chemistry with, someone that he could trust, someone that could bring a certain skill set to the table that he doesn't have, someone he would feel comfortable working with. But they want to do this team thing and not a one-man show. Knowing that, and Patrick Roy's name is coming up here in the province of Quebec a lot, especially from, a certain sector of the media. Do you think that he should be Gorton's guy?
It's hard for me to say being so removed, but I think he should. I think the Canadiens should do it. I think I'm probably speaking more from media's guy standpoint. The question I don't know is exactly how much Patrick has kept his ear to the ground on the NHL circles. I don't know if anybody knows that right now. So that would make me a little wary. The fact that he hasn't been in an NHL building in almost 5 years now.
Yeah.
A little concerning to me. That said,
Personally, I think it would be chaos. But if he were to ever get a position, I would see him more as a coach and not as a GM.
I think he likes coaching more than being a GM too. I think he loves being a coach, but he doesn't want to be at the whim of some guy he doesn't maybe trust or get along with. Sometimes making his power, holding power over him. I think what happens, Patrick needs, and what would make it work is what is his owner's relationship with Jeff Molson, and that if he has a good relationship with Molson, then I think he can deal with whatever Gorton. Any disagreements he might have with Gordon or something. As long as he knows that Molson is his guy and vice versa, I think Patrick could be fine. I mean, listen.
Yeah, but then you've taken the power away from Jeff Gordon, which clearly is not the case, right? Because based on the press conference a week ago, the power has been given to Gordon.
And that's why it maybe just is destined for never to happen, because I do think Patrick has to have a certain level of control to do whatever he does. He needs to be the boss, basically, unless he, is exactly in the same kind of power position as the other person, I think. He did not have that here in Denver, and it wore on him eventually. You could see the same thing happening in Montreal. I don't understand why teams do this. Who's the GM? I mean, I want to know who's making the personnel decisions either way. If Patrick is the GM,
well, you know what's happening in Montreal, right? The Francophone media and a certain sector of the fan base want to see a Francophone GM or a French-speaking GM because that narrows the list of candidates, and they probably won't be able to get one with the experience of a Jeff Gordon. They've made Jeff Gordon executive vice president of hockey ops, and he'll hire the general manager. But most believe that it's Gordon who'll actually be the guy without having the title.
Well, then I don't think Patrick's going to enjoy the job, and I think he'd love to be offered the job, but I'm not even sure he'd take it if that were the case. If he's the GM, the GM has to make the final call on personnel decisions, right? Yeah. It can't be the president of
well, he would take it. Adrian, he would take it. I'll tell you why. Because it wouldn't be long before the bubble would burst between Gordon and Patrick Roy, and there'd be a difference of opinion. He would let his difference of opinion be known. It would end up becoming a power struggle. And guess who the king is in the province of Quebec? It's Patrick Roy. So most people would side with him, and then goodbye, Mr. Gordon. And that's probably what a couple of daily newspapers in the city would want.
Is he still really the king of Montreal, though? Or is there still...
if he comes back, he will be.
95.
If he comes... Listen, there are some that will not forgive him for walking out on the team, but some were able to forgive after his jersey was retired. But...
Right.
That night he said, tonight I'm back home. And at that point, all was forgotten. So, look, I think that it would be a power struggle.
Yeah.
I think there would be chaos, and then he'd try and win over public opinion. I just think it would be a nightmare, personally.
There's always chaos, though, I mean, in hockey. So I know. Let there be chaos. Patrick's good in chaos, too. I'll tell you, he's a winner, man. And I'll tell you, nobody knows hockey better, I don't think, the game of hockey than Patrick Roy. He knows he knows everything. Does that mean he's a perfect coach and GM? Maybe not. But he won here. He won a title his first season with a pretty mediocre team.
I would, even though he's not known as the best team player, I'd be willing to say that if he knows hockey better than anybody else, somebody would have hired him in the last 5 years.
Well, that's true. And I can't speak to this with any specific knowledge, but you do have to wonder if he got blackballed a little bit based on what he did to the Avalanche, quitting on him like that. You do have to wonder about that.
Maybe stories came out and people said, I don't think I could work with this guy.
If so, I haven't been told that directly, really, even off the record. People still afraid of Patrick. I don't want to get on Patrick's bad side.
Yeah.
He's kind of a scary guy in a way when it comes to, not scary in a way that way, but you know what I'm saying. He's tough, he's tough.
He's got a certain presence. For sure. 100%.
He's got a very presence about him. When he's in the room, you always know.
Yeah.
You always know it. He's got a magnetism about him. Always.
Listen, if they do hire him, which I think he's got pretty much close to zero chance, to be honest. Like I said, I wouldn't hire him to be the general manager of this team. I think it would become Jeff Molson's biggest nightmare. I think it would be exactly what Jeff Molson doesn't want. But should it ever happen, maybe you can come to Montreal. There's going to be plenty of work here because there's going to be plenty of quotes, and maybe you'll have one more interview in his truck. Hey, thanks for doing this, man.
I'll tell you, I'd love to be back. I'd love to be able to cover hockey in Montreal. Be an unbelievable thing. I've always said that, the person in the top row of the Bell Center has more knowledge about hockey in their little pinky than I've ever had in my whole entire life. So it's always been.
Well, listen. If Roy would be hired by the Canadians once again, there would be no shortage of things to talk about. I mean, it would make our jobs much, much easier. Hey, thanks for doing this. We'll talk to you soon. You take care.
Pleasure, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Happy holidays. There you have it. He's Adrian Dater. I'm Marinero, the Sick Podcast.
Okay, Tony. Thanks.